These are the unwritten rules of living in Mexico. The first unwritten rule of Mexico is that if a man and a woman are walking together on the sidewalk and the woman is on the side closest to the traffic, well then she's not your girlfriend or wife, you're her pimp, and she's for sale. So if you're ever walking down the sidewalk with your partner, make sure that she's on the inside away from traffic, because this is really ingrained into Mexican culture and it's really, really important. I know this can be hard sometimes because like you switch sides of the street and then you have to shuffle around, switch positions. Or like we're walking with Laska, Maya and I are walking with Laska, and Laska's wanting to sniff the wall over here, but that's a side that Maya's supposed to be on as well. That can make it a little bit more tricky, but I still always try to make sure that Maya is walking on the non-traffic side of the sidewalk. Respect for elders is really important in Mexican culture, but be very careful throwing around the word señora. So historically speaking, señora is what you would call a woman if she's married, and señorita is what you would call a woman if she's unmarried. However, more recently, señora means you're old and señorita means you're young. Every Mexican woman remembers with horror the first time they were ever called señora. This is like using the word ma'am in the US. So just default to the word señorita and you're gonna be good. This is a quick unwritten rule regarding restaurants in Mexico. If you go to a restaurant here and they bring out bread to your table, well, if that's sweet bread, there's an additional cost to it. But if it's any other kind of bread, that's going to be free. Another unwritten rule is that if you're a foreigner here in Mexico, you better be very careful delivering criticism of Mexico. I learned when I was younger that if you're ever going to criticize someone or critique someone, you better deliver that in a shit sandwich. So a shit sandwich is you have a good thing first, then the shit in the middle, and then another good thing at the end. So if you ever have criticisms about Mexico, make sure you do that in a shit sandwich. Otherwise, a lot of people will take it in a bad way. The next unwritten rule of Mexico is that traffic laws are optional. If the speed limit is 110 kilometers per hour, you better be doing at least 130. Or if you can only turn left from the left lane, well then it's perfectly okay to turn left from the far right lane too. Of course, I'm joking when I say this, but I'm joking and I'm serious at the same time, if you know what I mean. But don't go breaking the traffic laws. Another unwritten rule of Mexico is that you start every conversation with a greeting. This is actually one that was pretty hard for me to get used to. So you wouldn't go up to someone and say, "Hi, excuse me, could you please give me directions to this place?" You would say, "Hi, how are you? Could you please give me directions to this place?" Even if you say please, it's still considered rude in the interaction if you don't start it with a greeting. So you wouldn't say to your landlord, "Hi, I wanted to let you know that the water is leaking." You would say, "Hi, good afternoon. I wanted to let you know that the water is leaking." And if you don't do that, it's considered very rude here, so make sure you do. If you're walking into a store, you always hold the door for the people behind you. Let's say you're walking into a grocery store and you open up the door and there's some people behind you. Even if they're not right behind you, you always hold the door open for them and either let them walk through or let them get close enough that they can put a hand on the door to hold it open. And if you don't do that, that's considered rude. And if you're going into a grocery store or another big box store in Mexico, when you go to check out, you're probably going to see that there's people there bagging your groceries or bagging your purchases. And these people, with the exception of those at Costco, are not employees, and you absolutely must tip them because they're not making any kind of wage. So no matter what you're buying, probably throw them 5 pesos. If you're buying more stuff, maybe even more than that. Something else people don't really tell you, but you just learn, is that if anyone sneezes in your vicinity, you're supposed to say salud, meaning health. So this is just the equivalent of saying bless you in the US. It's the same politeness, the same nicety to say salud. The next thing you need to know is that when you go into a restaurant in Mexico, you're supposed to say provecho to the other people dining there, meaning enjoy your meal. And you say this whether they've had their food already, whether they've finished their food, doesn't matter, just say provecho to them. And also the same applies when you're leaving the restaurant. You're supposed to acknowledge the other people eating there and say provecho to them as well. And it's very likely that someone will say this to you, in which case you would just reply with gracias. The next thing you need to know is that if you visit a restaurant in Mexico, it's expected that you buy a paid drink. Now, if you go to a nicer restaurant, it's very likely that they'll bring you out a free glass of water. However, everybody orders a paid drink in addition to the free glass of water, which is very different from in the US, because in the US it's very common for the only drink you have during your meal to be that free glass of water. But that's just not the case here.